Hello, this is David Wilcock, and welcome to part 2 of the Access Your Higher Self video collection. Again, please be advised that this is copyright protected content. We do not want to find copies of this appearing on the internet. Everyone who watches this video has an IP address in the video, and if there is any way in which a video that gets leaked online is traced back to a particular person who bought it, then damages will be assessed for that person to the amount of $77 per viewing of the video. We do monitor BitTorrent sites and video streaming sites online. Please don't violate our copyright. We don't want anybody out there thinking that they can be Robin Hood. This is all the best material I can give you on how to access your higher self. Nothing is being held back. It's all right here. Also, in terms of our copyright warning, this is all copyright David Wilcock 2010. Please do not present this information in any type of form. You can allude to what you've heard here, but any type of sequence where you begin presenting information the same way with the same wording or similar concepts in a similar order, that constitutes copyright infringement and you will be liable for damages. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get back to the fun part. Let's get back to our discussion. In the first video, I described to you how the conscious mind is not so private as you may have been led to believe. You are getting influences from all over the place. And we ended on this notion of reincarnation. The idea that part of this post-hypnotic suggestion that you may be walking around with includes a suggestion that you won't remember your past lives. But what if that's not the way it has to be? What if there is a way to change the hypnosis, to change the suggestion, and begin bringing in more information? Well, in cultures where people were not given that hypnotic programming from their parents and from schools and authority figures that say, oh, you can't have a past life, sure enough, children remember their past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson just dipped a teaspoon in the ocean by studying 3,000 children who actually could remember their past lives. This is what normally would happen. So reincarnation is an intrinsic aspect of our spiritual growth, and the point here is that we keep going through multiple lifetimes learning the same lessons, and those lessons of spiritual growth are not merely intended for us to learn it and then reincarnate in another human body and learn it again, and reincarnate and learn it again. There is a point that we reach where we got the lesson. We learned whatever it was that we were supposed to learn, and we are ready to graduate from being human at this level and move through a process that has often been called ascension. There are 160,000 documented cases in Tibet and India of masters at the end of their lives being able to move into a light body state, which is called in Tibet the rainbow body. This state is incorruptible in the physical sense. You become a luminous light form type of being. This is what many ancient gods and angels in various mythologies are reported to be. This is a level that you can attain. It's been attained by humans on many other planets because I believe the human form is not native to this earth. It's actually written into the mind of the galaxy. The galactic mind is what structures DNA. DNA is the product of an intelligent energy wave that's out there in the cosmos. That wave actually contains the genetic code. It also contains information in the form of thoughts. So when you can learn to shut off the hypnotic suggestion that keeps you from going crazy, basically, that keeps you feeling that everything that you think is a product of your own free will, then you're able to access these higher thoughts and you access your higher self. And in so doing, you go through ascension. This picture by John Seymour is a beautiful depiction of what could be happening to us as we ascend, and our bodies bursting with light as we leave the Earth's influence and go up on into space. I want to talk to you about the great illusion of life on Earth. Earth is, in fact, a school for spiritual growth, but normally we do not understand that that's what it is. That's the illusion. We feel that we're living a life where there's no cause and effect, where whatever we do is simply something that we do and there's no consequences, there's no hidden rules out there, there's no Santa Claus with a list of who's naughty and who's nice. All that stuff is a myth. Well, guess what? It's not true. The Santa Claus myth actually contains useful information because we're only experiencing apparent individuality. That's not who we really are. We're not just a separate self. Our minds are interconnected with others around us. Others, in fact, are our self. That's one of the other big lessons that we get. And if we honor other people's free will, that is the equivalent of honoring ourself. The two are intrinsically connected. If we infringe upon others' free will, we are damaging ourself. That means if we want to stay in alignment with our higher self, we have to do what's right for others and not just what's right for us. We also don't want to be a doormat. We don't want to let people walk all over us, but we definitely want to honor free will. It's a critical point. The big agenda that our higher self has is that we're here to learn love. If you want to access your higher self, you have to know what it is that your higher self wants. Because the great illusion is that you're crashing through your life and nothing has any meaning and you can do whatever you want. And if you lie to someone and you get away with it, then there's no consequences. If you steal from someone, you get away with it, there's no consequences. That's not true. Your higher self is out there riding you through a spiritual agenda, and there is what we call the glass ceiling, which means that everything that's going on in your life is being monitored and observed by higher levels of intelligence. This art from Andrew Jones really, to me, helps exemplify that process, how our mind is actually wide open and connected to an energy field, and so many influences are coming in. Well, one of the first ways that we access our higher self is through karma. Karma is a teacher, and the lessons that we're learning often come through tragic events. I've been accused of being naive for saying this, but I do believe every event that happens to you has meaning. There is nothing in our lives, especially at this time in history, where the planet is being led through an ascension, and everyone is being brought to a point where they're going to be able to move into this light body if they're ready for it. That process is making it more and more likely that when you have an infringement on someone else's free will, when you do something that hurts them, you are going to experience almost immediate consequential results from what you've done. So the tragic events in your life are not random. They are actually being given to you by your higher self. And most importantly, those events restore you to a perfect balance. The events that happen to you bring you back into a state where you are not actually needing any more karma. A lot of times when people have bad karma, they start to get worried and they think, oh my God, what else is going to happen? My father actually has a saying, bad things happen in threes. Well, I don't agree with that. I believe that when karma happens to you, you can actually bless the event. Even if you're sitting there and your finger's just been cut open and you're bleeding, you can say, I may not understand exactly why this happened, but what I do know is that it's brought me back to a perfect balance. The balance, of course, is the extent to which you have infringed upon other people's free will is the extent to which your free will be infringed upon. So if something happens to you, if you stub your toe, if you have a car crash, if something that has value to you is damaged, if you have damage to your physical body, if you have an unexpected problem, if you're arguing with someone, if your car breaks down, all of these types of things, if you start to think in a shamanic framework, are not random events. They are the result of karma that is bringing you back to balance because on some level you have done something that hurt someone. You've done something that infringed on their free will. Now here's an important point. You may think that the person's reasons are petty or that it doesn't have value. You think to yourself, well, yeah, but they're just choosing to be unhappy. They're just choosing to be upset. I didn't tell them to be upset. I'm just telling them what I need. Well, in many cases, even if you upset someone and you don't think that that person should feel that way, that you can decide in yourself and say, well, that's just ridiculous. There's no reason for them to feel bad, and I'm not responsible for that. Guess what? The way the universe actually works is that they will give you karma for the fact that they felt bad. It doesn't even matter if it's right or if it's just, or if it makes sense. If you want to interact with people in your life and you do things that are going to hurt them, there are karmic repercussions. Another important point here is that no judgment is ever intended or implied when you get a karmic blast. And a karmic blast, I would say, is a major event that obviously seems to be related to karma. The judgment might come in your mind, but that's your personality judging you. In the higher realms, there is no judgment because all it is bringing you back to a state of balance. You have this illusion that you're only an individual self, but you're actually sharing a mind and sharing thoughts with other people around you. When you treat them lovingly, you'll get positive karma and positive things will happen. But if you treat them in a way that infringes on their free will and makes them feel bad, then guess what? All these things are going to start happening. That's your higher self giving you a message. You are accessing your higher self when you have negative karma. And that's the kind of perceptual shift that you have to make to get through this process. You also can never need to feel fear again once you know that this is what's happening to you. Fear is an illusion. Fear is something that doesn't need to happen. It's a process of gaining trust in the holographic nature of reality. No accident or disaster will ever happen for a random reason. And you don't need to feel fear once you understand how to stop those things from happening. Because all you have to do is try as hard as you can not to infringe upon others. And any time that karma happens to you, you're being brought back to perfect balance, which means if you don't infringe on people's free will anymore, nothing negative ever needs to happen to you again. It's only as you create new infringements, it's only as you create new upsets in people that you then have a problem. And you will have further karmic events that start to happen. That's a critical philosophical point. So you can begin to step through the layers. Just as you see in this next art from Andrew Jones, you can become wise. You can become capable of seeing beyond the limitations of what you once thought that you were and becoming aware of this crown of light that surrounds you that allows you to fly into the higher realms and move through this higher consciousness. Your eyes can become the eyes of the divine, just like you see in this Andrew Jones image where the wings are coming off of the eyes. That shows us how we are able to access our higher self by gaining the insight of what it means to be alive and what life is actually telling us. Life begins speaking to us through synchronicity. Synchronicity is an excellent way for us to begin approaching that universal mind that we're all a part of, breaking down the notion of individuality. In order for you to become unhypnotized, your higher self will do this step by step. It will create synchronicity to get you to wake up to the fact that you are not alone, that you do have a higher self that is speaking to you. Synchronicity can come in the form of repeating numbers. The repeating numbers can appear on clocks. They might appear on the odometer of your car. You might see them on a license plate of a car that's around you. You might even see them on a store receipt. When I did a recent conference, my mother bought some items from the store. I bought some items from the store. We added them up. And then when we checked out, it was $11.11. And the cashier who rung us up was number 555. So 1111, I started laughing. Because in order for that to happen, my mother had to pick the food, I had to pick the food, the guy who scooped it had to pick just the right amount, and then we had to ring out with that particular cashier. If we hadn't have made all those decisions, it never would have happened. Now, we didn't realize that we were being led through synchronicity. A real synchronicity is where you're sitting there and you suddenly look at the clock and it says 333 or 555 or 1111. You didn't plan it. You happen to just walk into the room, you look at the clock, bam, there it is. Well, that means that these decisions that you're making all the time are not merely your conscious choice. You are under hypnosis. You are experiencing hypnotic suggestion from your higher self, and it is influencing when and how you do things. This really is showing you again that accessing your higher self to some degree is a discipline of awareness, becoming aware of the fact that you are all the time doing things that you think are private things, but they're not. Just like if someone is feeling stress or fear around you, you may start feeling stress or fear and you think it's private, but it's really not. Your higher self can be doing this as well. Importantly, it flags what was happening right before you see the synchronicity as that moment being a spiritual shift for you. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you see 333 on a clock, or 777 on a license plate, or you get a bank of digits that all line up on your odometer, whatever it is that you're seeing, try to remember what you were thinking about right before you see the synchronicity. Don't get all caught up in the buzz of the synchronicity. Step backwards and think about what was happening before the synchronicity. That's going to be the message. It will be telling you that you are on the right track, that whatever you were thinking about is a positive spiritual thought for you. These efforts are being carefully coordinated by higher beings in conjunction with your higher self in order to manifest those synchronicities for you. It takes a lot of hard work. In fact, a lot of what they do in the higher realms is coordinating what they call the great illusion here on Earth. They want us to believe that it's an illusion. They don't want us, until we're ready, to break through and realize that we are in a co-created reality, wherein anything that we create comes back to us. The thoughts that we put out there come back to us. But that's how you awaken your higher self, is learning to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and find out what's really happening in your life. This actually helps you break through the illusion and understand the magical nature of reality. When you look at this image from John Seymour, you can see the cosmic nature of awareness that you're starting to come into connection with. Pyramids were built by the ancients in order to help us awaken. You are, in fact, on the edge of dawn. You do have the awareness of planets, galaxies. The entire universe is potentially aware within your mind just by getting these silly egoic thoughts out of the way, and we're going to get into that in a minute. One of the ways that you can begin to access your higher self even more powerfully is to encode synchronicity. This means that you tell the universe what you will see as being meaningful. In order to get this to work, it's important that you don't plan every single detail of your life down to the minute. Be flexible. Be open to a more malleable schedule. Don't feel like you have to do everything at a certain time, because it's in those moments where you can be spontaneous, where you're relaxed, that really cool things will start to happen to you. What you'll find is that seemingly random actions and decisions that you make become meaningful. This is what happens when you start to live in a mindful way, to live your life in peace and in harmony and tranquility. All these things will start to happen. Also, if you want to encode synchronicity, it's very important to remember that the left side in esoteric anatomy is where energy is coming into your body, and the right side is where energy is flowing out of your body. This does actually correspond to what your energy field is doing. So the energy inside is associated with the service to self path, if you will, which again is not negative. It just means that you're absorbing energy. You're helping yourself. Well, you have to do that. You have to eat. You have to take care of yourself. Those are all service to self behaviors. There's nothing wrong with service to self. It's only if you go too far in that direction that you start to have a problem. If you make that your spiritual path, if everything is about helping yourself, then you're starting to veer into the negative path. But obviously you have to do it to some degree. Similarly, the right side of your body is where energy radiates out. When people point their finger, typically they point their right hand because that's the side that energy is coming out. They're throwing energy with their finger. So the way you can read this in the body is that when something happens to you on the left-hand side, whether it's a tone in your ear or a prickly sensation or whatever, it's typically telling you something about service to self, something about absorbing energy. It can mean that you're doing something or trending in a negative direction. A ringtone in your left ear could be a synchronicity telling you that. A ringtone in your right ear could be a positive synchronicity telling you that you're doing something that's service to others. Prickles on your skin, prickles on the left-hand side can be, again, the service to self. Prickles on the right can be service to others. You can also get warmth or feelings of waves or currents. You can also get them in your chakras, and later in the third part of this section of the video, you're going to actually know what the chakras mean. We're going to get into detail about how that works. So these bundles of energy, as you see in this image from Andrew Jones, I chose this because it's as if we're pulling in all this information all the time. There's these packages of information. It does become psychedelic. Reality becomes plastic. It becomes malleable. It's not so fluid anymore. And you can start to actually access your higher self by deliberate intent through what's called divination. That's what we're going to talk about next. One of the earliest forms of divination that I ever got into was the Ouija board, which uses the autonomic nervous system, slight movements in your hands that can be controlled by your higher self. People also use pendulum dowsing, which gives you a yes or no answer. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because the Edgar Cayce readings actually said that these were very susceptible to being influenced by the wrong side of the fence. So it's not a good idea to use a Ouija board or a pendulum. My higher self said that it did not want me to ever ask yes or no questions, because very often we try to ask yes or no questions that do not have an answer that is either one or the other. Asking yes or no question is an attempt to force your higher self to do one or the other when the answer could be totally different than what you're asking. So in general, I would say please don't ask your higher self yes or no questions. Find a way to ask questions like, if I make this decision, what's more likely to happen? Whereas if I make this decision, what's likely to happen? Because people would ask me for a reading and they'd say, David, should I move to Boulder, Colorado, yes or no? No. The way to ask that question is to say, if I move to Boulder, Colorado, what types of things might happen? If I stay where I am, what types of things might happen? When I gave people readings and they asked me this, I call it pulling a geographical. Usually what's going to happen is that whoever you are is still going to be with you when you go to a new place. You bring yourself with you. So people get this fantasy that if they make this big change in the way they live their life, that somehow everything's going to be different, but most of the time that doesn't happen. Getting back to divination, a technique that I do highly recommend because it is much less likely to be influenced by negative forces is bibliomancy. I recommend that you take, if it's a hardcover book, take the covers off to the sides, hold the pages between your hands, close your eyes, breathe deeply, try to get as deep into meditation as you can. I'm going to give you some exercises on that, and then open the book to a particular page with your eyes closed, and you might even want to actually try to feel with your hands or see in your mind a particular part of the page. You might see that there's light there or just something, and you put your hand on that part and then open up your eyes. Now, there was a very important time when I used bibliomancy. It had a huge effect on my life. I was at my grandparents' house. I needed to ask them for $700. If I didn't get that money, I was going to be totally broke, and I'd have to leave my apartment. I was terrified of doing this. I pulled this book off the shelf, which was Who's Who, 1981 to 1982. And it was just a book that my grandfather must have had because he was in there somewhere. And I said, well, if I'm not supposed to ask my grandparents for this money, then something will happen. I did this process. I tuned in. I opened a particular page. In my mind's eye, I saw light on a particular part of the page. I put my hands right over that light. I saw exactly where the light was in my mind's eye. And these are little snapshots that come in. I had my hand on it. I opened up my eyes. And lo and behold, out of everybody who could have been listed in this book, this was a guy who was a pioneer in the field of psychic research. Somehow, because he also was psychic, his entry in that book was encoded into the source field, and I was able to be guided to flip to a particular page with my eyes closed. Some part of me had its eyes open, and I stopped turning pages when I felt good, and then I saw where to look, and it was exactly where this guy's entry was. That to me was huge. I ended up facing my fear. I asked him for $700, and it was shortly after I got that financial stimulus that I actually began accessing my higher self through direct verbal information that I heard in my mind, dictated into a tape recorder, and had phenomenal importance to me in terms of its value. So bibliomancy can be a tool, and the idea here is generally you want to try to use a book that has inspirational or spiritual messages in it. I highly recommend the book for the I Ching. As one example, the Wilhelm Baines book. I've used actually like space almanacs, and then we've had some phenomenal things where like I opened up to the only page in the entire book that showed a conjunction where there was Saturn and Gemini, and it turned out that Saturn and Gemini astrologically had an incredible meaning for me. but I did it by using an astronomy book. Nothing unusual. So you can try that. You can force the synchronicity into a more rigid box. Some people like to use the Bible. I've done that too. But you can use any type of book you want to use, and you'll be surprised if you do this well, if you go into a deep state of trance, what will happen. This is also sort of related to the process of an oracle, which can be used in modern times if you're in a crowded area. Traditionally, what would happen is people walk up to a water fountain or some sort of oracle where you put coins in. You cover your ears, you ask whatever the question is that you want to know, and then you walk to the outskirts of town. And when you get to the outskirts at a certain point that feels good to you, you let your hands off your ears, you listen, and the first fragment of speech that someone says will be the message. You are going to find, as you get more and more into this, that you will start hearing music that spontaneously shows up in your mind. That's a message from your higher self in many cases. Listen to the lyrics of the music, analyze the lyrics as if they were the message, and sure enough, you're going to get access to your higher self. It will float into your mind. Why do I have that song in my head? Listen to the lyrics, analyze the lyrics. You could be around people in an ordinary setting. You don't have to use the oracle technique. You don't have to have your ears closed. And you'll hear people say something that has meaning to you. It can happen again and again. I remember one time I was listening to a piece of music that I really liked in a car. It was a Latin-style piece of music where it had stop time, up, 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 like that. And as I heard the stop time, somebody honked their horn on the other side of the street exactly in time with the rhythm I was hearing. In that case, it could be that I had such an emotional investment in that rhythm and I knew it was coming that my mind actually influenced this driver's mind, and then he honked his horn in tune with my rhythm because he felt it and he knew right when it was going to happen. Our minds are not private. Runes in the I Ching, you can use those. That's a method that I don't really use, but other people do. The idea here is that if you have I Ching coins, you can hold the coins and charge them with your energy. If you have runes, each rune has a different meaning. You hold on to them and you charge them up with your energy. If it's a rune, you charge them with the symbols. What do the symbols mean? What does it mean for you? It's very important to feel emotional energy when you do this to make it more effective. Tarot cards are also great for this. If you have a tarot card deck and you just bought it at the store, it's not going to work as well if you've never actually sat there, held each card in your hand, stared at it, and said to yourself what that meaning is. That's why you got to get a tarot book, get a good tarot book that gives you detailed examinations of what the meanings are. Read the book, look at the card, hold it in your hand, actually better to hold it in both hands, and give it that meaning with emotional energy. Really feel the emotion of whatever the card means. The source field makes everything. The source field is consciousness, and it also can be stored in matter. You will actually be imprinting waveforms into the matter of the card, which your subconscious mind, your higher self, can then feel that energy so that as you're shuffling, you'll actually be able to pull the cards. Now, in Tarot, there's a basic 3-card spread, which is past, present, future. You can use that type of reading. You can do a 10-card spread. Most of the books will talk about this, where there's 4 cards over on the right. Those are the last 4. Those are the future. And then the other 6 cards in the middle represent stuff having to do with the present. That means the position of the card also has to do with its meaning. There's also larger spreads you can do as well. Some people even prefer to pull single cards out. Now, the thing about tarot card spreads that I want to point out here is that you should also be aware that you can shuffle the cards, but the cards might fall out of the deck while you're shuffling. Anytime that you're working with tarot cards and a card seems to want to jump out, grab that card and set it off to the side because that card has meaning. I started to find out when I did tarot spreads that nothing is random. Whenever a card does something funny, even if like 4 or 5 cards fall out, grab them and set them off to the side. What will happen is that those cards will have special meaning for you. I started to do tarot card spreads in the senior lounge when I was still in high school, and it was astonishingly accurate. And I had a deck that my mother had been using, so she had already put the wave information into the cards. That's why they worked so well for me right off the rip. So in this art from John Seymour, we see the galaxy there. We see how divination allows us to connect with our cosmic self. You're making a bridge now. You're making a connection to some higher aspect of your own being. You can actually go into a deep state of meditation and will those cards to give you a message, to will whatever it is into being that you need. You hold a question in your mind, and the question gives you an answer. And in this art from Andrew Jones, I liken it to the flower that's blossoming, the identity that's blossoming within you. You are becoming something new. You are changing your form. You are learning to awaken to your higher self, to realize that you are not an individual. You are not just a separate self. That is definitely part of who you are, but there's something much more than that as well. If you want to access your higher self, you need to optimize your body. And there are dietary practices that are very important in that process. The most important things are to not eat white flour and white rice. You can go for whole wheat, you can go for whole grain, you can go for rye, you can go for buckwheat. Any of the other grains, just don't have the stuff that's pure white, or if it says enriched flour, that's the same thing. Even if it says unbleached enriched flour, it's still white flour. So you want to only use whole grain. Some people don't like that. It means that you got to change the kind of pasta that you eat as well. It means that in many cases you're not going to have a very easy time at the restaurant if you want to order a sandwich or if you want to order pasta. But believe me, I tested myself. These things make a huge difference. The same thing is true with refined sugar, even probably more so than white flour. Refined sugar is the ultimate psychic ability killer. The reason why is that the sugar molecule is a complex polysaccharide. It's all knotty. It gets into your bloodstream, it gets into every cell of your body, and that molecule actually absorbs the source field. It actually absorbs the energy that would make you psychic. My mother heard me talking about this and finally decided to stop eating refined sugar. This is only very recently. She wasn't ever able to remember dreams, hadn't been able to remember from years. But simply stopping refined sugar, she just called me on the phone last night, we were talking about this. She is having dreams every night. So much detail, it's amazing. And the only thing is getting back to what nature gives you. Nature gives you fruit, but nature doesn't want you to concentrate and boil off all that fruit juice down to some hard sugar at the end. So you can go to the health food store, you can get things that are made with, for example, barley malt, brown rice syrup, molasses. But you want to try to avoid even the evaporated cane juice because that kind of goes there. And there's a big, big misunderstanding right now with agave nectar. People think that's a good sweetener. Don't use it. Because Dr. Mercola has actually proven that agave nectar is just as bad or worse as high fructose corn syrup. It's a very, very highly refined form of cactus juice, and it does not help you along. So be aware of that, because many of these raw food snacks, they're all using agave nectar, and we've got to put a stop to this. Another thing that's really important is to not eat factory farmed meat. Now, if animals are fed organically and they're raised ethically, which means that they are not living in agony and that their slaughter is done ethically, then they will not have the energy of fear in their tissue. But if you have a factory farmed meal, if you eat an animal that was in factory farming, the anxiety of that animal does go into the meat. Now this makes it more difficult to go traveling. I have been told, for what it's worth, that you can always have fish no matter where you are. Fish is always going to be okay, because even when the fish is killed, it doesn't have the emotional energy that throws into the food to make you have a problem. But still, whenever possible, you want to go in favor of wild caught and move away from farm-raised fish, especially in the case of salmon. Farm-raised salmon is very bad because they're fed ground-up bottom fish, and they're loaded with mercury and poisons and toxins that can be really bad for you. The next thing is that dairy products should be organic, hormone-free, unheated, and eaten by themselves. This is another real problem because we love to have things like carbs and cheese together, like a grilled cheese sandwich, or like pasta with a risotto sauce or with a cream sauce. If you want to be able to access your higher self, you really want to do this, you got to get into food combining. Food combining practice, one of the big ones is don't eat meat and grain at the same time because it's two completely different digestive processes. If you eat them both at the same time, they cancel each other out. So you can eat meat with vegetables, whether they're cooked or raw. You can actually eat fruit with meat at the same time. That's not necessarily bad. You should eat ostensibly fruit before the meal. If you want to have fruit before a meal, eat it like a half an hour before. And as far as drinking water goes, that's another really important food combining technique. Water should not be drank 45 minutes before you have a meal. You can go up to 45 minutes before a meal, but not any earlier than that. And you should wait a minimum of 2 hours and preferably 2.5 hours after a meal before you drink water. Now, you can have small sips of water while you're eating, or soup or other beverage, but what you don't want to do is glug down a lot of water all at once, because enzymes are secreted by the pancreas. They go through the gallbladder, they are put into the stomach, they bind to the food, but it's a very light binding. And when you toss a little water in there, you rinse them out. And then your food goes through and it doesn't digest. So I do recommend enzyme supplementation, very important. You can go to the store and buy digestive enzyme pills. Those are just as important as taking vitamins or anything else. They will help you get a lot more nutrition out of your food, and you will have a much higher access to your higher self. Fruits and vegetables should not be eaten together. Fruits only take a half an hour to digest. So you can have fruit a half an hour before you start eating a meal if you want to. Sometimes people like to throw mandarin and oranges into a salad or something like that. I recommend not doing that. And another thing is that citrus fruits should not be eaten with other fruits. Citrus fruits should be eaten by themselves only because of their unique digestive profile. So citrus by itself, dairy by itself, which is really hard for a lot of people. You can have dairy after a meal. One of the things about sweets after a meal, even if you're eating health food sweets, is try to wait like a half an hour after you're done with your meal before you have something sweet. The temptation, and I do it myself, is to have a little something sweet right after you finished a meal, but you'll do a lot better if you wait a half an hour. So all of these things will actually help optimize your digestion, optimize your health. You'll actually feel better, you'll have more energy, you'll be more alert, and you're going to start contacting your higher self much more powerfully. You should be having fresh, raw, organic fruits and vegetables every day. At least one meal a day should be largely consisting of organic raw vegetables. That is so important. I recommend using a 369 oil that you put on your salad as a salad dressing, omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. They're called essential fatty acids because they really are essential. Your body needs them, especially for the health of the brain. Superfoods are very important, like super green powder. There's all kinds. I particularly like Green Vibrance is one kind that's really good. You got to look, when you find a brand in the store, try not to get one that has ginseng or green tea or any type of caffeine in it, because the caffeine will make you feel high for a little while, but then you have a crash from it. You ideally want a super green powder that has spirulina, chlorella, barley grass, wheatgrass, things like that, as well as an enzyme profile. And you can look around and you'll start to find them. Now, typically they are expensive, but if you just do 1 tablespoon a day of this in water, or in juice if you can't handle the water, you will start to have a tremendous improvement in your ability to access your higher self. Another thing that is of critical importance in accessing your higher self is vitamin B complex, and I don't recommend pills. I recommend liquid vitamin B complex. You actually squirt it and hold it under your tongue. 4 eyedroppers full usually is what you have to do. Hold it for as long as you can, at least a half a minute, and that will have a tremendous effect on your ability to access your higher self. I also recommend skate liver oil. Skate liver oil is sold by a company called greenpasture.org. I'm not getting any sales commission from them for talking about this, but this goes back to the work of Dr. Weston Price, who analyzed indigenous cultures and found that in these cultures, people had perfect teeth, they didn't have any cavities, they didn't get cavities, and they were fine. It's only when they lost the traditional diet and you brought in Western food that they started to have these problems. Again, it's the white sugar, the white flour, the factory farmed, unethical meat. That's what starts to cause a problem. If you want to have ethical meat, I highly recommend replacing beef with bison or buffalo. Chicken is a difficult one, but you can have organic free-range chicken. A lot of times that's okay. But you can go through and try to make that process viable for you. So this Andrew Jones art here starts to show how as you get into this dietary practice, your mind becomes part of that matrix. The geometry that you see around this person's head is the web of connections that you're making. You are bridging out. You are finding yourself immersed in this matrix of consciousness. And by purifying your body, you're purifying the instrument through which these messages will arrive. You're purifying your heart. And ultimately, as you see in this next image, you are moving into a cosmic reality. You begin seeing things around you that others do not see. You begin experiencing levels of existence, envelopes of consciousness, layers of reality. You find things that are not normally visible because you're accessing your higher self. And ultimately, your higher self is everyone, and it is everything. It is all around you, and it will always be there. The next step to accessing your higher self, and we actually had one person write in an email and say, "Oh, David, you didn't give anything new. These exercises were too generic. I know how to do tarot cards. I know how to do this. I eat a healthy diet." What I'm telling you is, what I'm giving you in this lecture is everything there is to know. So if you sit there and think, "Oh, this is too simple," well, then just practice the exercises, because if you think it's simple, then by doing it, you should be able to get results. There's nothing else to know than what I'm telling you right here. These philosophical principles that I'm about to give you are very, very important. First of all, there's only one of us here. What that means is ultimately we share one consciousness. We are not as separate as we think we are, and we're ultimately spiritually growing through increments of evolution that will ultimately bring us back to a full cosmic awareness. Free will is a universal law. I spent a lot of time discussing that. If you violate other people's free will, you will have a free will violation happen to you by karma. There are ways in the Law of One series, which is my philosophical base, a series of intuitively derived materials from 1981 to 1984. That philosophical base tells us that there's only two techniques we can ever practice that will create exponential spiritual growth for us. So obviously, anything that creates exponential increase is of extreme value. The first and most important technique that will create an exponential increase in the availability of power you can draw upon is to seek the love in this moment. I know this sounds ridiculously simple, and it is simple during the times that you feel loving. The key, though, is that there are times where you don't feel loving, where you don't feel that you can seek the love in this moment, where you feel angry, where you feel frustrated, where you feel stressed out, where you feel sad, where you're crying. In those times, if you can step away from the emotional state that you're in and actually step back into love, you're moving out of what I call the trauma self, and you're moving into a higher consciousness, and that will create an exponential increase in your availability of spiritual energy. Furthermore, you can do a second exercise that also creates an exponential increase in your spiritual growth, which is to reflect on the past for how it informs the present. Each additional seeking of a memory from the past that relates to what's happening to you now creates another order of magnitude of exponential increase in the power that you're seeking. So now let's go back to that moment where you have what some people call a breakdown, or where you lose it, where you're crying or whatever, or you're getting really angry. If you can step back, seek the love in that moment, actually go out of that emotion of trauma, which is usually stuff from early childhood, just coming back in a new form as a memory, and then begin to seek the love in this moment and begin reflecting on the past in terms of how it informs the present. What you do is see why it is that you're feeling sad, why it is that you're feeling angry, why it is that you're feeling frustrated, why it is that you're feeling stressed, and look at all the other times that you felt the same way. And each additional memory that you bring up is going to create an exponential increase in how much power you can draw upon. In this way, you can use traumas to be able to access your higher self by doing this discipline. It's very important. So here, John Seymour's art, Passing By as it's called, the asteroid that comes into the Earth, shows up in dreams a lot. People have these dreams where they think that the Earth is going to be destroyed. They see a asteroid coming in, or they think there's a pole shift, they think they're seeing tsunamis, and they say, oh my God, it's all doom and gloom. Well, each time that you can step away from these visions of doom and gloom, you're creating an exponential increase on the power that you can call upon. In the dream plane, people have everything in the dream is a representation of themselves. That's the big thing that we have missed when we look at dreams. If you have a dream about the world being destroyed, it means that some aspect of yourself is being torn to pieces, and that's a critical, critical point. Here with Andrew Jones' art, the hummingbird, I like to show that for the fragmentation. Look at this for a minute and envision how it is that you are flying your way through these fragments of yourself. You are experiencing a change, a mystical awakening. Some new aspect of your consciousness is now coming into being. You don't need to be held to the limitations of who you once were. You can smile, feel good, seek the love in this moment, and be able to reflect upon events from your past as they inform the present, and the dream that is your life will become much more of a happy dream, and the nightmares will begin ceasing, eventually stopping completely. As you move into dreams and you move into dream analysis, it is so important to learn the language of your higher self. Your higher self does not speak to you in a language that is conventional. It uses the language of symbolism and metaphor. That is of critical importance because everything is symbolic. Nothing is there for only what it looks like. It has other levels of meaning that you have to analyze by what that symbol means to you. There are multiple layers of meaning that will happen simultaneously. The dream can simultaneously be talking about one thing and another. That's why they use symbolism. A symbol can mean more than one thing at once, and each interpretation means something. And more importantly, there is also a feedback. There is no one correct interpretation. If you start to think that a particular symbol means a particular thing, your higher self listens to you and will begin using that symbol to mean that thing. I'll give an example of my own dream history. For years, I had dreams about musical instruments, especially drums, because I play drums. And I kept saying, why do my dreams keep talking about music? Do they want me to play music? What's the big deal with the music? I guess I could go and jam out on my drums. I don't know what the point is here. It took me years, actually, in the early times to figure out that the drums were not actually my drums. It was a symbol of my spiritual work. But you see, this preserves free will, because you don't always know what the symbols mean. In this way, your higher self can give you information, but unless you're ready for it, you won't understand it. And that's important. The higher self cannot actually come right out and tell you something. Jesus, the master teacher, did appear to be in direct contact with his higher self. And you'll notice in the Bible that it says that when he spoke to the masses, he spoke in parables. He spoke in the language of the higher self, symbolism. It was only with the disciples who had gotten to higher levels of attainment in their consciousness that he actually spoke without using metaphor to shroud the meaning of what it was that he was saying. So here with Andrew Jones' art, look at the duality. Look at the contrast that can happen. See these vistas of awareness and recognize how you can blend those two aspects of your personality together. You can begin to form a bond with your higher self. And as we see this John Seymour art, you can have the stepping stones to infinity. You can merge with the cosmos, step out amongst the planets, learn to use these dreams as symbolic messages that you can decode and decipher and gain important value from. You can milk them for meaning and learn the truth of what it is that you're being told. Ultimately, I'm going to be telling you in the third section of the video how to directly access your higher self for verbal messages. I want to briefly touch upon some of that information right now because a lot of it did come to me originally by studying protocols of remote viewing. The first step to doing remote viewing is to not analyze or attempt to understand your data. A remote viewer goes into a deep state of relaxation. I'll be teaching you how that works. And he's going to go in there and access this information. But when you start getting things in your mind, writing them down, documenting them, you don't want to analyze anything. You just keep on going. You also should not have emotional reactions to your data. Don't have any reaction, just let it go through. Ensure your body is comfortable. You don't want to be thirsty or hungry or needing to go to the bathroom. You want to keep a brisk pace, keep things moving. And you want to let your conscious mind say whatever it wants. Document everything. Don't screen out any thoughts whatsoever. As you see this last image from John Seymour, you see that you can use these protocols to merge your mind with the consciousness of the universe. You are coming together with the universe. In this Andrew Jones art, your own mind becomes the all-seeing eye. You see everything. You tap into the field. You become aware of universal light. And this will ultimately breach into the direct conscious access with your higher self as we continue in part 3. Thank you.